On this week's podcast, we are three very sad Celts and one very happy Italian. We're going to be reviewing the first weekend of the Six Nations, competing as to who is the most miserable. Spoiler alert, it's me. And we'll be maybe trying to pick some positives for the winning teams as well. Anyway, let's start the show. Joining me this week, I have got Irish Adam, Scottish Ethan, and I am Welsh Hugh. We are the Celtic contingent, and we also have a special guest this week for the first time ever on whatever iteration of this URC pod is. We have got Mike from the Italian Rugby Forum, who is Italian. Hooray! Welcome, Mike.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk today.
Yeah, we've wanted to get an Italian guest for a long time, and now we're going to work in Benetton and Zebra questions at some point, I'm sure. But as always, we need to crack straight on with the show. And because we have two representatives from the game here with us, we are going to start with Italy versus Scotland. Mike, never in doubt. Never in doubt.
Yeah, maybe for you, mate. Yeah, no, it was an interesting game. I felt before the game, had the rain started, it probably would have suited us slightly better.
Mm.
I think Fischetti, Spagnolo, even Hazard, Zebre is sort of growing, and our sort of front five, Zambonin has been brilliant at Exeter. So I was saying to a lot of the Scots fans outside, I'm sort of hoping, I'm sort of hoping it rains a little bit for us. So, but ironically, we played better before it started raining. So, yeah.
Well,
I think
that was the thing that Casada said in the post-match interview, in the English one he did anyway. He said, well, we beat Wales in the rain last time, we beat Australia in the rain, and now we've beaten Scotland in the rain. So we just need it to rain
yeah.
every week, and then we'll
Yeah.
win the Grand Slam.
Definitely going to see some people start doing some, rain dances. um, yeah.
We should swap stadiums.
Yes. It become a fortress for us. So
Yeah.
yeah, we definitely should. Let's have a conversation offline on that.
Yeah.
So the way that I kind of interpreted the game was that Italy obviously got two tries early, and then the rain came down, and then Scotland were always chasing. And the way that it,
Mhm.
it turned out was that I think Italy only needed to kick, was it one three-pointer in the second half to win? It's
Yeah.
it was how much do we put to the rain? It doesn't feel like proper analysis, but how much of it was down to the rain?
It's tough, isn't it? I think there was definitely decisions that could have been better in terms of like the how they sort of developed throughout the game. So, for example, there was a Cannone charge down. I don't know. Is this was I think it was just after the second half. So when it restarted, and Cannone didn't ask the question. He just went and got penalised for it. But had he said Ferguson is unbound because he didn't put his shoulder in, he literally just had his arms, and he gets the charge down, pass it to Lambert or no one in the backfield. Try right, Menoncello passing out instead of trying to sort of take it in. After that charge down again, ironically landed in it. Better teams would score from that. So that's something that these players need to learn very quickly. So yes, obviously the rain helped us probably defend. We kicked it long. Obviously there was not many opportunities for it sort of skidding off because it was so sort of saturated in that quagmire at the end.
Mm.
But a lot of it, I think, comes down to we could have made it a lot easier for ourselves had we sort of taken all of the opportunities presented to us.
That is a bit of a trend with Italy, isn't it? Is that when you do win, it tends to be low-scoring games. Like when you
Yeah,
beat Wales last year, it was a low-scoring game as well. Australia, I think, was mid-20s was enough to win the game.
yeah, yeah. I think I suppose that probably comes down to um, us backing our defense, and also there's a point where the players sort of looking to protect the lead as opposed to score more. That's sort of a mentality that needs to change. Like that needs to change if we want to kick on from here.
Yeah, I think so. One thing that I want to ask you about, I've got lots of things that I want to ask you about, but something that's been on my mind is Paolo Garbisi. I'm sure that you like follow him at club level. He's not had a great time at Toulon in recent times.
No.
What I was just going to ask you what your take on him is because he seems like a nailed on almost first name on the team sheet for Italy. What do you think it is behind that?
I think, first of all, I think the French really, really value kick percentage at goal, and as we've seen, obviously there was a few that went astray. I think we finished on 75%. So factoring those kicks in as well, from this game, it probably would have looked a lot better. Um, that's part of it, and secondly, I think actually in Italy he has a lot more freedom to you know play as he wants to play. So I think it's something where we probably need to see more of that at club level for him to be able to fully express himself as a player. And that's why I was getting quite excited about sort of some rumours for a swap with Albornoz getting back to Treviso, where he was running the show before he went to Montpellier and obviously subsequently won the top 14. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. He's an interesting player. Obviously, he has moments of brilliance, and he just needs, yeah, I think he just needs more game time. Like for us to see him at the levels we've seen him in France, he just needs more game time, and he needs to sort of be given the keys to the car, as it were.
Mm. And then, but inside him, Fusco's got a lot of stats. Obviously, touched the ball the most of any player. Was nine scrum half feels like a position where Italy have been waiting for someone to say, "This is my jersey." Do
Yeah.
you, are we any closer to an answer on that?
For me, hands down, and I've been very consistent with this, even when frankly, there was a lot of mean people out there talking about Varney. I think Varney has that quality of pass that I don't think any of our scrum halves have. So each one has their own USP. Ironically, full scores normally like his physicality, and he played 12 up until sort of under 18s, where Paul Griffin ironically converted him to play nine. So he's really only been playing scrum half for like 7 years. So it's a position that he sort of adapted to as opposed to evolved with. And then you have, Alessandro Garbisi, who played 10 and he converted to nine. So again, they each have like their own ability. Martin Pejarello, very sort of typical French, flary, sort of sniping nine. But yeah, for me, I think Varney is like he's just the most rounded for me. Box kicks brilliant, doing fantastic at Exeter, worked on his physicality massively. So yeah,
Well,
but
he's a good Carmarthen boy. That's the secret.
yeah, that's it. That's it. Obviously, you guys produce fantastic nines, eh? So thank you.
Grow on trees, they do. Grow on trees. Anyway, Ethan, speaking of number nines, I posted kind of before the game, people said to Tooney, yeah, you got three good nines. You're going to have to make a tough decision here. And Tooney said, I disagree and just picked all of them instead.
Yeah.
One of many things that Gregor Townsend is coming in for a bit of stick for. I guess just before we get into the nitty gritty, talk me through your experience of watching this game because if I'm honest, I did not expect Scotland to lose this one. I expected this
No.
game to be a bit of a non-event, to be honest,
Yeah.
and it was the opposite of that.
I think, I mean, obviously, that's the second time we've lost to Italy in a row in Rome. So it's not Italy. Like, I would never expect it to be a whitewash against Italy because Italy are getting so much better. And that they're definitely not the team you would think from even like 10 years ago. I think it's just more the manner of how we lost that Scotland couldn't throw a line out or catch a ball. And then they got absolutely demolished at the scrum, which you wouldn't expect from having, Pierre Schumann. Oh, actually, it was two actual Lions and obviously Xander Fagerson, who, if he was fit, probably it was in contention to be a starting
Would have
test
played in every
line.
test for me, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, so that's not a weak front row. And they got demolished. Um, and that I think there was one or two lineouts in the Italian 5 meters within like the first 10 minutes. And it just didn't work. And I think that's really what cost Scotland the game was that they just didn't have any set piece. For
Yeah,
teams that are traditionally decent-ish, or at least, they can get the line out function, because Grant Gilchrist is an excellent line out operator. He came off quite early. And I don't know why Ashman just couldn't throw the ball. Like he's normally, well, he's been getting better. Like I was a bit of a Ashman skeptic until like last year when, like after the lines and stuff, I'm like, oh, he's actually been one of the best things for Edinburgh when he's able to throw the ball correctly. And yeah, it really reinforces the Gregor Hiddleston debate that
Yeah. He didn't
Gregor,
didn't
yeah,
Hilson score for Scotland A at the other weekend or something? He definitely played.
yeah, I think Scotland A, Hiddleston, two rows, and Redpath, I think, scored.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he
Who,
scored as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, that's another thing I want to touch on later on is that some of them probably should have been playing in the
I
team,
did yeah,
or they might be playing next week.
I did see the Scotland A lineup. I was like, that's very strong. That is a very strong team. Just quickly
Yeah.
before we move off the scrum, Mike, that wasn't something that like people who aren't that familiar with Italian rugby were expecting to see the scrum march forward like that. Was that something that you foresaw?
To be honest with you, that's the thing that I was most confident on coming into the game. I think Ferrari has been very strong in URC. In fact, I think if you look back to last year under Bortolami, I think Benetton had one of the strongest scrums. Obviously, they had different players in Gallo, etc. But Spagnolo, we know what he can do as an impact player off the bench. He's so solid in the scrum as well. Fischetti's been doing well. I think actually that's probably ironically one of his weaker parts of the game is in the scrum, but Nico Otera doing really well in the top 14 as well. So yeah, I was probably least concerned about that because we also had the best part of three tests against the South Africans last year to measure where we were, and actually I think by the last game we were putting them under pressure at the scrum significantly before they went to 14 men due to the red card. So
Mm.
yeah, I was sort of quietly confident. I wasn't confident in the lineup though, and that's something I was really sort of quite happy to see. Quesada spoke about it in the post match about how much analysis they did. We had a brief conversation with Zambonin after the game, and they're taking the analysis like probably to the level that all of the other nations are doing it. But I think it's probably something which we were quite lax with in terms of our analysis, and sort of we were always like introspective, looking at ourselves, what can we improve instead of okay, how do the others play? So I think that's something that we really sort of looked into.
Mm. Ethan, coming back to you, the big question is obviously all about Gregor Townsend now. That's the talking point and has been for some time now. I was skimming back some articles to look for something else earlier, and I came across a Scotland article where the Gregor Townsend was quoted as saying, "We've learned the lessons from the autumn," and talk about things that age badly.
Yeah.
That coupled with the reports, which we assume are true, that he is due to take over at Newcastle Red Bulls after 2027. It's hard to feel like the next 2 years, 2026 and 2027 for Scotland are just going to be treading water. Surely this guy's kind of heart isn't in it anymore.
Yeah, it was interesting because firstly, it was that conference where the Telegraph, yeah, the I can't remember who it was basically saying, oh, there's rumors saying that you're in links with Newcastle, and he said, well, I've not signed anything, which I think it was Tom English was saying that's quite a different words. Like he's not signed anything, but he wasn't accusing him of having signed a contract. It's just, you're the, in linked with something. So I feel like it is an open secret. It's like, yeah, the Newcastle interim coach or whoever it was has resigned or he's gone now. And it's kind of like, oh, wow, I wonder who's in next.
Mm.
Like, are they just keeping the nest warm? And then I can't remember who it was. It was, oh, it was the guy, I can't remember. He was basically Oh my gosh, I feel
He's
it's a
the
few weeks
analyst
ago.
or something. He's become head of
Yeah,
performance.
yeah, and he's like, oh, he's worked closely with Gregor Townsend, one of his like key men in the Scotland setup. It's like, I wonder what that might entail. And all these Scotland players signing for Newcastle, like George Turner, it's kind of like, I wonder
Miller
what
Mills
this
as
might mean.
well.
Yeah, Miller. Oh yeah, I forgot about that actually. So it's just kind of one of those things where it's like you're clearly on the way out, but here and it's it's just one of those things. It's like either go now or be like, yeah, I will be going, but that's after the World Cup, and just just cut it off there and be
Mm,
like, let's just focus on Scotland. That's 2027. I'm here right now with Scotland. So it's a kind of that weird limbo. It's like we know he's going, but he's not convincing us that he's staying.
mm.
Or and yeah,
Yeah, you wanted to jump in there, Mike?
Yeah, just very quickly, just reinforcing everything Ethan said. There was two really telling questions at the post-match conference, and hopefully you guys can go back and watch them on YouTube. But one of the journalists, one of the Scottish journalists said, with the news that's coming out, even the past couple of days, linking you to Newcastle, do you think this affected anything? And he said no. And then the journalist, and he didn't elaborate. And it's the first time he didn't elaborate the entire post match. He was very sort of forthcoming with information. The journalist sort of tried to spin it a slightly different way, and he just responded with no and didn't elaborate again. And then they sort of just tried to rush to the next question, but he was very forthcoming with his thoughts, etc. But he was very explicit, so I think that probably just sort of reinforces what Ethan's saying there as well. Just it's really sort of reiterating the fact that there appears to be credence behind the rumors, and he's just trying to sort of make sure people don't put two and two together with regards to, or maybe two and two together and making five because it has nothing to do with the results.
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
I mean, the thing with Gregor Townsend's coaching position is that there's such an obvious replacement there in Franco
yeah.
Smith. And, using that as kind of a jumping off point, what was it, 12 Glasgow players in the starting lineup for Scotland, something like that? A heavy Glasgow
Yeah.
core to the team. But obviously, that didn't include the halfbacks. Now, when the 10 is Finn Russell, you kind of go, fair enough. Obviously, he has played for Glasgow in the past, but not under Franco. But
Yeah.
then with the kind of scrum half situation at Glasgow, these two guys going at it hammer and tongs, unbelievable levels that they're both hitting. And we saw the
Mhm.
impact that George Horn had.
Yeah.
What do you think um Tooney's thinking behind selection is these days, especially bear in mind what we said earlier about players who were playing for Scotland 15 who arguably
Mhm.
should have been in this team.
Yeah. But it's an interesting because out of all the things that I want to criticize Scotland on, I feel the selection was probably what I wanted it to be. And I'm not that harsh on the back line for this game because, it's good that he's experimenting because, one thing he's done really badly is he doesn't play in foreign players,
Hmm.
but rather he leans on the crutches of having like Duhan there or Blair Kinghorn, who, like Blair Kinghorn when he's in form, perfectly fine, but he's been off it for a while. And what I've been saying for this Six Nations is either he needs to try and win the Six Nations or get third or second to try and like secure his job, or he throws it out the window and experiments and develops the next team for the World Cup or the future. And it looked like he didn't really do either with the initial squad selection when you had like Dave Cherry and Johnny Gray in the mix, who have both been like fantastic Scotland players over the last few years, or over the last like 10 years or whatever, but they're not really the informed choices. Like, surely Dave Cherry's not going to play in the World Cup, sort of thing. You'd want Gregor Hiddleston or Seb Stephen or Harry Morris to get as much time as possible against the other sort of like tier one nations. But I mean, this lineup this week is, I know it's a strange one that I don't know whether he'll play Dolby and Stain next week on the wings against England, because we were like, oh, Duhan was, he was away with Edinburgh last week and he wasn't here this week. So whether they're resting him for that or adapting it, because again, in the autumn, um, Steyn replaced Duhan against New Zealand. So obviously he's thinking, well, actually, Duhan's not the right fit.
Mhm.
So it's just hard to read into
Yeah,
what he's wanting to do.
yeah. Exactly. I just don't think with his contract situation and with the rumors about him, I don't see someone who's really forensically self-reflecting a lot. I think it's difficult to shake the feeling that Scotland are going through the motions. Adam, you haven't had much to say so far, mate, or we're going to come to Ireland in a minute. Just any shots you want to fire on Scotland, really, before we get into talking about your team.
Well, I can't really fire any shots because, I'm wide open to everything now. But it was one of those that I'm always like quite nice to see Italy winning, but then it was Kaelan Scully who's on the Interpro show with me put up a stat on Twitter saying that Scotland have the same amount of wins as Italy in the Six Nations since the last World Cup. And
Yeah.
I found that completely and well, it shows how much I'm not so sure if it like shows how much Italy's progressed, which they have progressed so much, or if Scotland's regressed, and it's like that fine middle that wasn't quite sure on because when I was watching the game, like Menoncello was absolutely incredible. Like he was really, really good and it was really enjoyable to watch him play. But like the rest of the Italian team as well, they were just firing on all cylinders and the rain also helped. But as we mentioned, like at the start of it, the rain could help Scotland too. But I just felt like it was a really entertaining game as a neutral to watch, just in general. Like either team winning, it was a great game.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Mike, last one to you as the victor. Just a kind of question. I always felt that Italy go well when Benetton go well because there's so many players from that team. Benetton haven't been going that great for a couple of seasons now.
Mhm.
Zebra have shown improvement. I think they've won at least 3 games this season, maybe four, and obviously
Yeah.
won 4 or 5 games last season as well. Just how do you because we're primarily a URC show, what's your thoughts on how those two teams are going and how that feeds into Italy at the moment?
Yeah, I think with with Zebre like as the complete analog here because I think they're probably the ones which have the closest intrinsic links to the national team via Brunello. Like it's quite there's like a clear pathway about how much Quesada is influencing, how they want to play and the structures and how players are getting developed and who's getting game time. You can start seeing sort of some of the players coming through full score. Obviously, the example that you pulled right at the start, over the past sort of season and a half, he's grown like exponentially in comparison to his more sort of irrational plays a few seasons back. So we're starting to see maybe more sort of less performance based, like you said, sort of performance to performance, like correlation towards sort of the success of the national team and more sort of performance at player level. So we're saying, okay, well, we need Zambonin, who obviously went from Zebre to Exeter, but he's been brilliant for the last 2 seasons. He's just taken an additional step. Fischetti, who unfortunately was at London Irish and then had to go back to Zebre and again found a bit of form and he goes elsewhere. So we're starting to see these players who are getting sort of almost like leveling up and going elsewhere. And I think that's probably contributing more so than the club form, if I'm being really honest. But with regards to URC, I am always optimistic about Zebre doing, more and better. And I think Brunello, CC, and all of the coaches there are brilliant. They're pulling in some of the espoirs back as well, so we're going to have some really exciting players. Obviously, Odiase came back as well at the start of the year, and he's doing really well. So I think Zebre are at the precipice of what do we want to be in terms of identity? Are we still a development team? Are we a team that wants to start competing for playoffs? Do we just want to provide players for the national team, which I would hate? In fact, that would be like the worst case, but that's where they are. Benetton need to find a coach, frankly. McRae has been rumored to go back to Newcastle as well, so I don't know if they're Ethan going to be having some
Yeah.
sort of like Scottish super coaching group there. But he's strongly linked there. Uh, and we need to find someone who is going to provide time, identity, and yeah, it's Benetton for me. Ironically, I'm more concerned about Benetton than I'm Zebra at the moment.
But it's a hell of a job for the right person, though, Benetton, because you obviously the premier team in your country, you know, resource-wise is a lot stronger than a lot of the other teams in the URC. And like, if it goes well for you, there's a clear path there to the Italy job one day, a bit like the same for the Glasgow job in Scotland. So I just think, like, if a coach just sits down, has a bit of a thing, you know, selling it to the missus, hey, how do you fancy living in Northern Italy for a few years? You know, it it's for the right, like I've said, for the right person, that is a job that could blossom into something really, really good. And I think, I don't know, maybe it's just a hangover of 5 years ago when Benetton were the whipping boys. It's like, no, now if someone's smart, they could make a real success of that role.
Yeah, I think to be fair, I think it's now on the head there. I think there's a lot of issues with regards to how we are developing players at Benetton as well. So the previous administration put like this quota for Italian qualified players, and Benetton pushed back quite hard on that as well. So at one point, we're meant to have, I think, out of the starting team, 7 needed to be Italian qualified. It didn't make any sense, to be honest. And we've seen sort of the benefit of particularly sort of the Argentinian players coming through, and you know, players like Fekito have obviously, you know, contributed as well. So we need to. It's a puzzle. I think I would love to see them invest a lot more money in coaching and a lot less money in players. If I'm being really candid, we saw what they can produce at the Italy 15 game against Scotland. Gallerini, he's obviously he was brilliant at the under 20s, but he's like 22 years old and he's pushing against, you know, an ex-Lion and winning penalty tries. He won man of the match. So, sorry, penalty tries, penalties off the scrum. So the players are there. For me, it's more about invest in coaching, invest in the infrastructure, spend less on players, and that's the right route for them, in my opinion.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. Anyway, we're going to move on to talk about Ireland versus France in a moment. But before we do that, I just want to remind people, anybody watching on YouTube, subscribe to the Global Game Line. This is the YouTube channel that this is on right now. We are not just all about the USC or all about the Six Nations or all about the World Cup or whatever it happens to be. We are all about everything on this YouTube channel. You can find Six Nations pod. You can find an Irish dedicated pod where you'll find Adam every single week. You can find a South African pod, a specialist pod that's on a break during the Six Nations, but our regular host, Mohammed, hosts that one. You can find a French rugby pod specialist, top 14 France pods that I host with my co-host and Nantic host, Madame Maz. When the women's teams are playing, you will find women's podcast on here as well. Have I forgotten anything? Oh, yeah, USA. There's a USA specialist podcast. There's a bit of everything on this channel, audio and video. If that sounds like a bit of you, please consider subscribing. Leave a comment down below, share a link with a friend, and many thanks in advance. All right, Adam, come on then. Right, so normally, because normally we'd start with the winner. Obviously, we don't have a French person on this pod. I would be the closest to that doing a French podcast. However, you know, the audience that's watching this is all about Ireland. So where do you start with that? Because the most common thing that I'm seeing and I'm reading and I'm hearing is chickens home to roost. That's the phrase that is coming out about this Ireland result, Ireland performance, Ireland team where it is right now. Can you just recap for us why people are saying that?
We were found out at halftime, like 22-0. It was the first time in a long time. I don't know. I haven't seen any stats or any sort of sayings on it. Like when was the last time that actually happened where we didn't score a point in the first half? But it was like there was no point of the game bar the first like 30 seconds, and even then France had a disallowed try, and then I thought, oh yeah, we could win this. And then it sort of was like Stade Francais, the lights were on. It was a sad Thursday night for me, but there wasn't, I didn't feel like, you know, I speak a lot about rotating the squad. However, we can rotate the squad and have positive rotations when we don't have an injury crisis. So we have an injury crisis at the minute, but I felt like with the rotations that we had the likes of Jeremy, well, we had the Lockman, who started his first game for Ireland since like 2022, 2021. I think they were saying on commentary. You had the likes of Clarkson, who is going to be a talent. But then for the likes of those guys, you still have, James Ryan on the bench, Finlay Bealham on the bench, Ronan Kelleher. Like, are they impact players to come off the bench necessarily compared to the likes of Milne, who came on, scored a try, played very well. You had the likes of Conan and Timoney, who changed the game for 5 minutes. It felt like 5 minutes of like, oh yeah, we might do this. And then you had Crawley who came on, who also changed the game as well. But I feel like with Andy Farrell's team management, Craig Casey came on for the last 5 minutes and he pushed Gibson Park out. Casey came on for Osborne and Gibson Park played wing for the last 5 or so minutes. And that's what's wrong. The team management, I feel like in this squad is completely and utterly ridiculous. I'm like the fact that we tried to do a 7-2 split on the bench. No, but no, we did a split on the bench. Um, we had Conan and Timoney there. They really benefited us in the game. But the fact that we thought that we could have bullied France with that pack, and we were trying to play almost like I said, like the whole thing in Ireland is that Leinster are now playing a way that they look like they're playing as South Africa. That's the Nyber effect. But the Nyber effect is now starting to creep into Ireland. And when you have a huge French pack full of really talented players, um, like they were absolutely incredible. But we can't afford to do that. Like we tried to play a kicking game when their back three is one of the quickest back threes compared to our back three, who had Tommy O'Brien, who has pace to burn, to be fair. Osborne, who's like David, my co-host in the Interpro show, says they'd rather him be a 12. I quite like him as a 15, but I can see that comparison that he could be a very good 12 as well. Not enough, not too much pace, but he's still quite good. And you had the likes of Jacob Stockdale, who played his first game, Six Nations game since 2021, but he was caught out in certain aspects of it as well. So I felt like we were all over the place, and there was no part of that game where I thought, yeah, we like bar there was like when Timoney scored and when Milner scored, I was like, yeah, there might be something here, but yeah, it just felt really flat. Like we went out, the anthems looked like the Ireland players were sort of, ooh. And since then we showed that, and France absolutely dominated.
Yeah, if vibes are a thing, and if you can pick up vibes via social media and stuff, the vibes throughout the week were always that Ireland were beaten before, the whistle was blown. That it was because of the injuries, like you said, it was a case of damage limitation, and there was very little belief that the players coming in, or at least that was my perception, that the players coming in would be able to do a job. I will just quickly insert in here that the fact that the game was played on a Thursday night, when I woke up on Friday, no part of me could comprehend that it wasn't Saturday.
Yep.
I don't know if you were the same, Adam.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, I had a gig in Manchester on Friday, and that was the only thing that was like, yeah, no, it is a Friday, because I had to take the train to Manchester, and I was like, yeah, fair enough. It is a Friday. So it was almost like a nice long weekend, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. We got to talk about him, and I think you know who I'm going to mention, is Sam Prendergast once again the big talking point of it. Now, it's such a done to death debate at this point. So what I want to say is that I thought that in attack he was Ireland's best attacking player by a long way. But can you trade off with the defense? Because it didn't matter where they stood him, at 10, in the midfield, on the wing, outside midfield, next to the ruck. Just France found him every single time, and every single time it was 3 meters. Like, what do we do? Like, what in your opinion needs to happen?
So, in my opinion, this is when the comments start, because normally when I mention Sam Prendergast, it's for negative things. I did think he did really well in attack. I did think that for his sort of half volley, but it just happened to land right next to Thomas Ramos to land to I think it was Louis
And he was like,
Barry's.
"Oh, you're going to volley against me? Okay,
Yeah.
then."
Well, I think that would have worked against any other team, bar what South Africa, England, New Zealand, and France. But like, fair play to trying it. Like he's 22 years of age, having almost that confidence to do it. However, I do think France really knew what they were playing against, and that's why they just targeted him. I think he had like the third most. I had the stats up. I had the wee handbook up. I think he had like the third most tackles in the Ireland squad. Yeah, 13 tackles. They were just running at him and they were making meters out of him and it worked. Um, but for an Ireland fan's point of view, you have to remember that Johnny Sexton didn't properly. This is when I defend Sam Prendergast, so I hope the comments are nice to me. But yeah, Johnny Sexton didn't properly break through the Ireland setup until he was 23 years of age. And that was at a time where Ronan O'Gara was relatively undroppable. And Johnny Sexton came in and he was not pristine. He was actually very much built like Sam Prendergast, sort of that stocky type.
And then
But
he put the pads under his shoulders. Maybe
yeah,
that's what he needs to
maybe
do.
it is. Maybe it is. It pads and shoulders. But I do feel like, there is games that really make a player, and he has had a couple of those for Leinster now. Like he's like the Northampton game last year showed as well, like that sort of little breaks in defense. But in a professional game, we had two fly halves and two scrum halves on at one point as well. We were trying our best to be Scotland. We had
Yeah,
Gibson
just
Park and
on
Casey.
that, I got so confused about that. I didn't know what was going on. So where was who changed position, Crowley or Prendergast?
They looked like they just rotated. Because it was either Crowley got there first and then Sam stood at 12, or Sam got there first and Crowley stood at 12. Like I joked about on the Interpro show that there could be a moment where they fight for the last minute drop goal. And we were like, if it wasn't for the scoreline, that we were that close to it happening. Because as I said, the game management was utterly, like I don't know why Jamie Osborne was subbed off for Craig Casey. It should have been Gibson Park. Gibson Park was very slow. I don't think, like, when you used to compare like Gibson Park to Dupont and you saw it like on Thursday, I was like, I don't necessarily think Dupont, I think Dupont had quite a quiet game, but he still looked world class. Whereas Gibson Park had an absolute, like, he wasn't as quick. And it's very like well, I was gonna say it's unfair, but at one point they were the top two scrum halves in the world. So,
Yeah.
and he's the Lions scrum half as well. So yeah, you can compare them. But yeah, I just felt really deflated. I felt like there was a lot of and also it's going to be a lot of people blaming it on certain players and blaming it on the fact that it's a heavily rotated squad. But my whole point is I would rather this injury crisis build a squad so that we don't get caught out like we were in 2015 against Argentina, for example. I'd rather it happen now and build a squad and build an identity through that. But I felt that Andy Farrell has coached us into such a one-dimensional, you will take the ball, run up and ruck, and that's it. There wasn't any type of excitement. There wasn't any type, like, the attack was I've got the stats here. For defenders beaten, France beat 41 defenders, Ireland beat 23. For it was meters made. France made 642 meters. Ireland made 365. Like it was an absolute trouncing. Like I felt like there was a part where Ireland just had the ball and we were camped between the 50 and their like 10-meter line. And I was like, there's no way we're gonna get to the 22. I think honestly I can count on my hands. Actually, I didn't even think we made it into their 22 in the first half. That's how well France played. And Belliberry, butchered that for a second off the top of my head. Anyway, but he took everything he could. Like he could have easily scored four tries if the try wasn't disallowed. Like he scored a hat trick, and every single one of those like was just by freak accidents. Sam Prendergast kicking the ball, Dupont casually chipping over a box kick, and him randomly being there. And it was like, of course he was there. But it just shows how incredible this French team is because I'm really worried now looking at this Italian setup and how they played with flair and they didn't play with like a care in the world. Whereas this Ireland squad is that they're so heavily drilled, they're so one-dimensional, and if they do anything wrong, that's when it goes wrong. Like it would be like two passes, a skip pass. It's all so carefully measured out. And watching Ulster now, I feel like I see a backline that has a lot of fun. I don't see that here. Do you know what I mean? I see it
Mm.
all like really, really carefully thought out, and it's just not working for us.
Yeah, when you say that's exactly it. When you explained like the two fly half thing, I was like, "But that's so un-Ireland. That's so un-Farrell. It's just it speaks to something. It speaks to something not right there. I mean, if I now talk about it from the France point of view, and Mike, maybe I'll get you to chime in on this as well. Is I kind of posted that the reason that France won is because their players are better than Ireland's players. And, sometimes it is that simple. I think we're all really guilty of overcomplicating rugby sometimes. Sometimes the team with the best players wins. And I think that France have, certainly in the back line, I think France have the best players. I don't know which players, from other nations get into this France back line. Maybe Sony Tuipulotu, and that's kind of it, probably. Like, and what I found really interesting is it does seem like this Dupont Jalibert thing. If you go by social media, which I'm referencing a lot tonight, and you look at the posts that both of those have been putting out individually on their own feeds and what's been coming out of the France official pages, it does feel like there's a lot of PR around this, which suggests to me that it's going to be stuck with and that this is the plan now. Now, Untamak is apparently back in the squad for the next game. He's back from a kidney injury, which is a really weird one. But I think there would be massive uproar, especially after that performance, if Untamak is in and Jalibert's out. I think that would be an absolute scandal. But it was interesting to see on the field how they made it work between each other. It does feel like they've had to sit down, whether it's over a coffee or whatever it is, over a croissant, and gone, look, we are the two most talented players possibly in Europe. How do we work together? And though, like in the first 20 minutes, where Ireland were sort of kind of on top, or at least had a few opportunities, Dupont was in charge, and he kind of managed the game. And then as France started becoming on top, it was kind of more like, okay, now Jalibert, you start playing the game that you want to play. And it was fantastic to watch. And then when Ireland had their spell in the second half, it went back to Dupont being in charge. And it was actually quite interesting because game management Dupont is not a Dupont that we see very often because Toulouse usually win by so much. We very rarely see Dupont having to go kick to touch, slow rucks, things like that. So it kind of reminds you that he can do it extremely well. But then speaking about those two, the phrase that I saw, which I really like, is Le Charnier Trois, which is kind of the halfback three, because the third one is Ramos. And what was really interesting in the stats was that Jalibert and Ramos both had the same number of passes, which speaks to that. There's three of them in this. And I do think that was kind of a bit underrated about how Jalibert and Ramos worked together as well. And it was really pleasing, really fun to watch. And next time you watch France, or if you watch this game back, I really urge you to like look at the body language and look at how they look at each other. Because South Africa do this as well. You need to look at the kind of like it's no like big England style celebrating high fives, jumping around, bumping chests and things. It's just like a, narrow of the eyes and a little nod or a little like backhands kind of high five, low down kind of one. It's just like, yeah, we're here to mean business. I know how good you are, you know how good I am, and we both know how good each other are. Like it's kind of a thing with France is it's always the talent isn't the problem. It's about whether they can deliver on that talent. And in this game for me, they did. Just quickly on BLBRA, it would be so easy to put him down to just pure speed. Like, oh, he's just speed. He's just a quick player, but he's not. He's so smart. And I am a little bit worried if like one day he does an ACL or an Achilles or something, that might prematurely end his career in terms of being at the top level. He's still so young, but he played fly half coming through the Espoirs at Grenoble, and like he never just goes to the ball. If there's something going on, he never just goes to the ball. He always holds his wing. He always holds his width. He always runs to the space, not to the ball, because he knows his job is not to create the chance, is to finish the chance. And that's why you see what we saw with Ramos, the outside of the boot volley, was he knows that LBB is on the wing in the space, and he just needs to get the ball to the space. And it doesn't matter how it gets there, as long as that ball gets to that space, LBB is going to score. And his anticipation, his timing, when he chooses to accelerate, such a smart player. And really, if he'd have won World Player of the Year last year for me, I think, obviously South Africans would have complained a lot, but I think it would have been very fair. Mike, if I bring you in on this, kind of for whatever reason, because imperialism probably, the Italians and the French are kind of on the same team. We have decided that here in the UK. So, what did you think of your brothers?
Yeah, I think they really sort of concentrated on first of all impeding Ireland's attack. So I think Adam sort of again sort of hit the nail on the head where they were trying to stop that sort of multi-phase moving on to sort of the multi-wave outside, trying to get to the fringe attack by just slowing the ball down legally, illegally, however way you want to sort of throw it. They were brilliant, forcing sort of slow ball. And that's sort of really tough to then attack against, sort of big, powerful forwards that can sort of transition from a power game to a more sort of fluid game where they're becoming link players to sort of unlock, like you said, the three halfbacks to sort of exploit the space out wide. So I think the game plan is just all very smart, very calculated, and I think actually when Ireland did move away from what they were trying to do, at least at the start, where they're getting some traction with the high balls, and then obviously there was that period where they were really sort of targeting LBB, and he managed to get the balls, and it seems like they went away from that slightly, and they tried to transition away. France just can flip flop like between, oh, okay, they want to play like this. Okay, well, let's play a power game then. If they're not gonna play the aerial game, we'll play this way. They can just transition between sort of so many different styles, and it's so quick. Whereas even England, as an example, they've sometimes been guilty of, a team slightly changes the way they play, and there's no plan B for them. Whereas it seems like France have an A, B, C, D. They can play sort of all of these different ways, and it's taken time for them to develop that. So I'm really excited to see what they're going to do. It looks like it's sort of a two-horse race at the moment. I hate saying that, but that's the way it looks for the Six Nations so far. So it's going to be really interesting to see sort of how they get on in the upcoming games. But yeah, listen, they're a joy to watch. Love the fact that they can just transition to an offloading game, especially when Ireland were going for two up tacklers, so there was going to be space behind if they managed to get those just around sort of where the ruck would be. They were sort of blitzing around. Just fantastic players, man. I'm just really, really excited to see what they can do.
Yeah, they're definitely a team that you're excited to watch again. If I talk about something that you mentioned there about the physicality, I think when I saw the team sheet, the one area that I was like, ooh, I'm not sure about that was the second row with Olivon and Guillard. Now, obviously, Guillard plays second row for Lyon and is probably Lyon's best player. But Olivon has played second row, but is mainly a blindside flanker. So I was like, I'm not sure that this is going to pay off, because I thought on paper Ireland's second row might have been stronger, but that's not how it turned out. And if you look at Olivon's try, Guillard makes the line break and Olivon finishes it. What other team in the world are you going to see second rows interplaying like that? It's crazy. And Guillard's what a player. Got a player of the match with like 50 minutes on the pitch. Just physicality, ambition, just what a lump as well. Like, I'm glad I don't have to feed him, because he probably puts away his food no bother at all. So that I really enjoyed watching that. Ethan, if I come to you again, tenuous link historically, the Scottish and the French have always been on the same side. Yeah. So that you therefore must have been supporting France in this game. To be honest, I don't think I needed to use the historical reference to work that one out. What was your experience of watching it?
I mean, it goes both ways. It's sort of like, I didn't actually, well, I watched a bit of it when I was coming home from the gym, just because for my new job at the moment, I have to wake up ridiculously early. And I think at that point was it 22-0? I don't know if I was peering in through the window of the pub, trying to read the score. And yeah, I just don't know whether Ireland's just, I mean, obviously they are devastated by an injury pandemic at the moment. But whether like Ireland, like this, the Ireland we knew over the last years is now waning. And that, I mean, sure, I don't think Bandiaki was playing. No, I'm right in thinking that. Yeah, like he and I think it's probably best encapsulated by putting Gibson Park on the wing in a team against a team that's got Louis Bielbieri is a bit of a questionable decision. Because you can make the argument if it was someone like if you put like Jamie Dobie against Louis Biel, yeah, you might be like, yeah, okay. Or if you put, I'm just trying to think of other scrum halves. If you put Casey on the wing, you might be like, yeah, okay.
Grant Williams.
Grant Williams, yeah, you'd be like, or when South Africa had like four scrum halves that game in the World Cup, that statistically one of them would probably be on the wing. You'd be like, yeah, that's fair enough. But like, I don't ever associate Gibson Park with running. Like to me, he's always behind the ruck and then just passes it. Like I don't think I see him. I mean, he's got a good support line, but you wouldn't see him chase the whole ball across the whole pitch.
He is more aerodynamic though these days, Adam.
Yeah, he is way more aerodynamic. Like it's sort of the same as Stockdale. He's also more aerodynamic. If that was ever possible, but I feel like that's the second time I'm pretty sure he's played wing for Ireland. And that's it, and it's a really weird one because the first time he did it, I remembered he was quite good because he can catch a high ball and he can just launch it back. However, in the 5 minutes that he did play wing, I was struggling to see Osborne didn't look injured. I was struggling to see why he was even like why he just didn't come off because I was just like, oh, give him, he's not probably going to play next week. It's hopefully going to be Casey and Doak next week against Italy to see how that would go. But yeah, it was just one of those weird ones. Like as you said, Ethan, he does a really good support line, but I don't think I've ever seen him have like a break. Like, do you know, like one of those like wee sniping breaks? I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's going to be a Leinster fan that links
Yeah.
it in the comments. Please do, because I want to see it. It's in no way I'm hating at the minute. I just want to know.
So, kind of coming back to finish on Ireland then. Not to pour the misery on you, Adam, but you lost this game. You got thrashed in the A game, and you got thrashed in the under 20s as well. A little bit troubling times, fair to say.
It's times that I feel like if you watch the Interpro show, we've almost been worrying the end times are nigh, and that is honestly like they had a bit of a debate on the Interpro show with WhatsApp about what a good Ireland coach would do, and I said Joe Schmidt when he was the Ireland coach, he wasn't afraid to start young players, and he wasn't afraid to give them a go. You had some of Ireland's players now the likes of Gary Ringrose started a game against Australia. There was like, when you think about that, Jacob Stockdale got a start under Joe Schmidt. You had a lot of these players got their start under Joe Schmidt, and he wasn't afraid to give it a go. And he was much more conservative in terms of picking from other provinces as well. What we have an issue now is that Andy Farrell put all of his eggs in one basket for 2 seasons. All of the Leinster loosehead props are injured, all of them. It's mad, but that's what happens when you put all of your eggs in one basket. We're seeing now all of the eggs in one basket isn't going to work. Even for the Ireland under 20s, for Ulster, I think we only had two representatives. It was much more for the Ireland XV game. And from what I've heard of that, that wasn't as well set up as we thought it was because I think England Day actually had a training session beforehand, and it seemed like Ireland Day were just lost. Um, there's a lot of players that we need to not slowly blood into the system, but I feel like from now get them in. Your likes of your Bryn Wards, who at the minute it's like a lightning in the bottle. If he was a Leinster player, he would have been playing on the weekend, and that's the thing. Nick Timoney would have 70 caps for Ireland if he was playing blue, if he was playing in blue. It's one of those. Stuart McCluskey as well. He would have way more caps if he was a Leinster player, and that's the annoying thing about it. It's that Ireland fans are starting to, well, I hope Ireland fans are starting to realize is that we put all of our eggs in one basket and we're reaping the reward of it now. Which is just in a way, I'd rather that happen. I'd rather that realization happen now than in the middle of a World Cup and we lose in a quarter final again. This is the time to build, and Andy Farrell must be feeling some form of pressure, I reckon.
Has to be. Has to be. Do you want to jump in there, Mike?
Yeah, just on Adam's point about what the best coaches will do at international level, I feel you're absolutely spot on, but it's such a thankless
Yep.
thing to do to blood young players, and we've seen it obviously with the Italian teams of past. You know, Franco Smith was like really forward thinking with blooding Garbisi just out of the under 20s, Varney, because he saw sort of the bigger picture, but obviously there's results that come off the back of it as well. So there's that patience element. And, Lancaster, for example, built a team that Eddie just adopted for two
Mhm.
World Cup cycles as an example. So we're seeing sort of that is definitely an element. That transition is a really sort of needs to be a well managed element, but it's also there needs to be an expectation from the general public, which I think actually, me included, we're becoming more and more sort of impatient with results and stuff because it is a results led business. But if this is the transitional point for some teams such as Ireland, well, we need to sort of go in sort of
Yeah.
head first and just say, okay, well, it's going to be tough for a season or two, similar to sort of what we're seeing in Wales in some respects, right?
I,
The under 20s are obviously starting to produce. So that's sort of the thing I wanted to add, just to sort of reinforce your point there. The
Mhm.
best coaches do, but also there needs to be an element of patience
Yeah,
from the fans'
100%.
perspective.
I
I,
think.
I,
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
I was
Go
going to
on.
say, I mean, I've not got the best Irish rugby history knowledge, but from what I can remember, there was a long period of time where Munster was arguably the dominant of the four provinces. And then obviously it's been Leinster dominating for who knows how long. But if Leinster's on the dip and Ulster is currently probably got the best prospects, I'd say, out of the other
Just
three.
preempting the comments that say Leinster have won 11 in a row.
Yeah. I know, I can't wait to be reminded
Sorry.
how many stars they've got.
No.
But this could be the mark in the beginning of either more Ulster players in. This could
Well,
be,
yeah. I mean, if you
yeah,
look at young talent coming through, Jude Postlethwaite is the one that springs to my mind of the guy of like this guy, this kid could be amazing. Yeah.
I-
The thinking about the under 20s and stuff,
yeah.
it is testing times. It is
I,
testing times.
I,
Like
I,
like you say, Andy Farrell is probably under pressure. And that point about, if we just got to take the hard decision and say, look, it's going to be tough a couple of years. I think okay, but I think a lot of Ireland fans would say, yeah, we should have said that 2 years ago. We shouldn't be doing it now.
Oh no, no, 100%. I feel like everyone now, and it's something that I get berated in comments every time it comes around to the Ireland setup. It's just like I feel like the Lions was really nice because I was sort of like, yeah, this is how Andy Farrell plays rugby, guys. Like if you actually support an Andy Farrell led team, you're sort of like, oh, he picks his boys, you know. Um, and he nearly quite literally picked his own boy. But anyway, but I feel like with Andy Farrell has this whole thing about cohesion. Cohesion's really good when it comes to winning Six Nations consistently. However, I feel like if you look at the bigger picture and you look at especially like the 2023 Grand Slam to the 2023 World Cup and not being able to chase after a game, we sort of saw elements of that there. We sort of like heads down as soon as the first try went in, and it was sort of like we're just going to concede now. But I feel like with blooding young players in, as we said, which is already sort of happening because it was a forced injury crisis, but actually blooding, like having a dogbo on that bench would have worked out really well instead of having James Ryan, who came on and just conceded penalties like he normally does. There's players that are too safe in that squad that feel too safe in that squad that should be dropped.
Mm.
There's a lot like we're gonna have a tight head crisis if Finlay Bealham gets injured because Finlay Bealham's too safe in that squad, and he has not had necessarily a good one Lions tour, good season so far. He's been caught out a few times internationally, but you've got the likes of Sam Elo at Connacht, who's a tight head who we can just bring in, put him into the Ireland camp. We might struggle for a little bit, but it's that struggling that benefits the team. It builds the players. But, putting them into a coliseum like the Test rugby, it's just it just will make a team better, and we will see the rewards of it. The likes of Sam Prendergast having a really good attack game, but needs to improve on his defense. It's normal. He's young. It's his only his second year playing professional rugby. That will happen.
Dan Edwards has played more pro rugby than Sam Prendergast, and he's a year
Well,
younger.
it's mental how it works, because Sam Prendergast was rushed through the under 20s to play for Ireland. It. I do feel like it will reap its rewards at some point. I think the next World Cup's a bit too far. Whether or not we're going to see a coaching change between what after the World Cup, I'm not sure. But as an Ulster fan, I'm worried that they're looking at Richie Murphy. They're rubbing their hands and going, he's probably the next one for Ireland, because I'm really worried about that.
Yeah, if Connacht could win a few games under Stuart Lancaster, maybe that would help you out.
Oh, yeah, hopefully.
But anyway, that's that game covered. We're going to move on to England versus Wales shortly, but I just want to remind people that if you are listening on the audio format, that's the format that we need the most help with from you guys to grow it. It's the hardest place to grow a podcast. So if you can share links with friends, if you can give 5-star ratings, that makes a huge difference for us. On Spotify, you can also leave comments. Try to be nice, because for some reason Spotify comments seem to be the most brutal ones. I don't know why. It's just a thing. But yeah, any kind of support and love you can give us on the audio side of things, much appreciated in advance. That's the side that we really, really need your help to grow. All right. So we've done Scottish misery, we've done Irish misery. You guys don't know misery anything like I and maybe Mike does. But not at the moment. Wales got destroyed again. Wales played is probably more accurate to say than Wales got destroyed at this point. 48-7 away to England. The question being how England only scored 48 points. I watched back the game this morning, or in bits of it, and I completely had wiped from my mind that England had 2 tries disallowed in this game that on another day very much could have been given. One was for a neck roll and one was for, I can't even remember, something small. So yeah, still bad. 1 try we've scored in our last 2 test matches, but we have at least had 10 yellow cards in our last 5 test matches. So, that's a thing. I think, like I suggested, I shall now open the floor to questions, because it's too big to come at Wales from one particular angle. Who's got something that they would like to know about my pain?
The discipline, as you said, like, do you think that's a do you think that's an in general feeling towards the game, or is that a coaching setup? You can coach discipline. However, for the discipline to go that badly wrong, is it a players feeling lackluster to it and just conceding penalties through one, tiredness, two, they haven't genuinely been coached discipline, or three, is it some other point that they just will try things in the moment just to see if it works, and then it just backfires?
I think what it is that it's all about trust in the process. So the Scarlets are a team that give away a lot of penalties. And I asked Josh McLeod, who obviously played in this game, about it. And he said that partly it's, the Scarlets are usually the losing team. And for a referee, it's sometimes easier to just penalise the worst team. Subconscious bias is a thing. And, it's away in Twickenham. Twickenham factor is very real. So it's partially that. And he also said that he doesn't mind if players are playing on the edge and they're trying to make something happen and they give a penalty away because of that. So I think that's part of it. I think 2 things is it's the losing team and its players are just trying to take risks to try and turn the tide and, almost take drastic action. But I also think that it's not trusting the system around you. It's not trusting your processes. It's not trusting what you're supposed to be doing. It's not about falling back into the pattern, going through, some control, like almost kind of like don't think kind of thing. Just go through what you've gone through in training and, What happens, what happens. If you concede a try, it's all right. Reset, go again. There's none of that. I think there's a lot of players feeling like they need to do something kind of emergency, like break glass and do something in order to stop a try because they don't trust that they're going to stop a try normally. And I also think that it's a lot of players panicking. They see something start to go wrong and it just compounds and they just kind of forget where they are. And, I think it probably comes athleticism and physicality is probably into that as well because fatigue, not even late in games, but, from an intense play like a maul or something, you get tired from doing that. Suddenly there's not as much oxygen going to your brain and then you make a mistake. So I think there's not one thing that goes into it, but what I did notice was that after the game, Steve Sandy made a big talk about, oh, we've really focused on this on training. We've had officials come in to work on our discipline and stuff, and that's quite worrying because that suggests that he doesn't know how to fix it, and he's tried things to fix it, and it's really, really not working. Mike, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, no, my question was very similar to Adam's, but I think for me, my question's more sort of direct to how much do you think frustration with everything that's going on in the background is starting to seep into sort of how Wales are playing the game? Because obviously, players who don't know whether they might have a contract, to feed their families, they've got mortgages, people sort of sometimes dehumanize players because they can't sort of understand the concept that these are human beings with very real lives and problems outside of the sport. How much of that do you think is starting to seep into what we're seeing, particularly this impassioned Welsh side away at Twickenham? Certainly at the start, a lot of them are very young players, inexperienced players. How much do you think that was a factor, at least at the start? Because as you pulled that up, I was shocked to see that they actually conceded less than England there.
Yeah, I think obviously it has a massive thing, and even if it's not just the players on the pitch, like of the starting pack, I think Dewi Lake is so it the region that's got the most uncertainty at the moment is the Ospreys, and the only Ospreys player in the pack was Dewi Lake, and he's already signed up to go and play for Gloucester next year, so he kind of has that certainty. And unfortunately, just while I'm on it, Dewi Lake is a player who I've backed a lot, and I think he should be Wales captain, even if Jack Morgan is back fit. I think Dewi Lake is a better captain, but he had probably his worst ever game for Wales, and that was topped off by the tap and go without a tap. Don't tap, just go. So maybe this particular team that was fielded on the day, not so much, but in the whole environment, these guys are sitting around the table at lunchtime, sitting in their rooms in the evening. They're having conversations, and what do you think they're talking about? They're definitely talking about this. And it means that they're not fully focused on being the best rugby players they can be. They're not coming into work every day thinking, how do I play well today? What do I need to work on today? They're thinking about other stuff, which is clearly not good. But it also, in a funny way, I think it kind of shields people as well. And the reason that I say that is what you'll see in every kind of post-match report, post-match opinion piece after every Wales defeats from the last year is that someone will definitely write, oh, you can't blame the players, you can't blame the coaches because of the turmoil that's off the pitch. That this is a symptom of a bigger problem and, not a disease in and of itself. And, I literally read something today where they said, oh, Tandy can't be blamed for this. And I'm like, really? Like the head coach can't cop any responsibility for this performance. Like things have definitely got worse in these 5 games. Yes, it's only been 5 games, but these are definitely the 5 of the worst games. Like there were some pretty bad ones under Gatlin Mark II, don't get me wrong. And obviously the England defeat at home last year, Tandy wasn't through the door yet. But if I flip it around and you ask the question, what has Steve Tandy turned around? What has he improved since he's been here? Nothing. There isn't anything that's gotten better. And Wales are averaging 50 points conceded per test match at the moment, and that includes the Japan games. And yet Steve Sandy apparently is supposed to be this great defensive mastermind, was defense coach for the Lions. So what's going on there? And if you're going to tell me, oh, it's because he's a head coach, he doesn't have time to kind of, focus on purely laying the codes out and going through drills. Well, then what was the plan then? What was going on? What was the intent of bringing him in? So yes, obviously the uncertainty has a massive destabilizing effect on everybody and everything, even the fans in the ground. But I think in a funny way as well, it's also shielding some people from getting more criticism than they otherwise would.
I think it's also like a self-reciprocating cycle there, though, because people are gonna try not to, potentially provide more money to the WRU because not necessarily agreeing with what's going on out in the field, and obviously the players might feel slightly less supported. Normally, like very warm from the Welsh fans in Twickenham, and because of all of that, it means that they have less funding, and it just feels like there's a bit of a cycle that needs to break at some point, for it to sort of really sort of kick on from where this Welsh team is now. But I think the point that you made was really important. Like it's sometimes about using it as like a bit of a shield. As long as the steps, you can see what's happening in the background, you can start sort of piecing like where is it that we want to go as a team and how are we going to get there. But it feels like, at least from an external perspective, as an Italian fan and someone who lives in the UK, I don't really quite see that either. And it's probably a question where I think, a lot of the fans, particularly ones who maybe don't follow the URC as closely as we do, they'll have no idea. So that's it. Always feels like it's moving in that direction, eh?
Mm. Ethan, do you have any thoughts on
I was
on
going to
this
ask.
game?
I was going to ask about Steve Tandy because I, I mean, I was speaking about last year. It's like, what was it, 14-86, roughly? Like last year,
68.
68. So, I mean, granted, it is slightly better margins. I'm not going to question the ratio, but at least one try, it's not as bad per
Well,
se.
yeah, but in terms of performance wise,
Uh,
that first half was as bad a first half I've ever seen. I've ever seen. And the, I don't think England were that amazing. I was thinking like I think they just cruised through it really.
Mm.
And which England players are getting a highlight reel out of that? And you're thinking, oh, maybe Henry Arundel. But if you actually watch his tries, it's just like run-ins,
yeah.
unopposed and stuff. He's not really getting a highlights reel out of this game. George Ford, if you're like really nerdy and you like tactical kicking and stuff like that, maybe. I think Tommy Freeman probably gets a highlights reel out of that game. I think it's not been talked about enough, like how good his carrying and stuff was. Like really physical, not kind of what you expect from a guy who's spent most of his career playing wing.
But
But
now maybe.
yeah, maybe that I just don't think that England had to work. Like one of Arundel's tries was he was literally just given the ball by Wales, basically, as we got a free kick off a scrum, and then 5 seconds later, Henry Arundel is running over the try line. Like when it's at that level, that's how bad it is. So that I really honestly don't think there's any positives to be taken from this game at all, and it's just a feeling of always getting worse. And I guess, Mike, I'll ask you about England first, what you made of England's performance before I then ask you about a kind of a comparison between Wales now and where Italy have been in the past.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think England just default when anything's going badly to either, a long or high kicking game with Ford, or they're just going to try and just keep it, up the jumper and just power through teams because they have the ability to do that. That said, it's interesting to see sort of what they're trying to do. From an outsider's perspective, it looks like they're utilizing this as preparation for next year. Not only with, some of the players coming in, they're trying to keep some consistency in terms of the core of the team, but they are trying to sort of look at, what was Arundel going to do. Admittedly, it works out exactly the same as what he did against Chile, in the World Cup, where, like you said, he didn't work very hard, but he found himself in the right place and he did enough. So yeah, listen, England are a team that's growing. They're the only ones that I can see right now, putting it to putting the French under any form of pressure for that title. So, for us as sort of neutral fans, it'd be really good to see sort of how they they grow, because we want to see sort of that contest on the final day. Um, But yeah, it's just an embarrassment of riches. Both teams, France and England. Now that I bring them up, so just jealousy from my side, to be honest,
Yeah.
more than anything. But yeah,
As someone who's seen their team go through
yeah.
low times and now start to turn it around, what is the thing that changes? What is the thing that turns a team from, let's call it what it is, whipping boys, into a team that is capable of picking up wins?
I'm going to be really honest. I think it was the development pathway. So O'Shea and Aboud set that up in 2017, obviously way later than any of the other nations. And we really only started benefiting from that sort of 2 to 3 years later. Lamaror, all of those boys initially started come in, and then obviously as that became more developed, we started seeing more sort of talent emerging. We're starting to see that with Wales now, whereas I felt like Wales almost the success from the past almost like papered over some of the cracks that were starting to emerge due to sort of the systemic issues at age grade. And now we're starting to see that sort of upturn where we need players and we need players to have game time and we need players to find spots. That's the problem. And that's the problem we have as well. So we've had probably a decent crop. Obviously, I know we had a really poor start of our under 26 nations this year, but we've had a really good crop for I would say, last 9 years. Like we could probably pull two or three players, which are national team level players, and we're starting to see them sort of pull through. The issue that we have is getting them game time. So there was a talk. I don't know if you guys were aware of this a couple of years back. They were talking about doing an academy version of the URC and have all of the academy teams like the Espoirs and have that. That resolves everything. If I'm being really candid, right? That would resolve everything for every single team because then we would have the pathways. We'd have players that are able to play instead of just sat on the bench or not even finding game time. So to answer your question directly, I think it's transitioning those players that have high potential and finding them game time. So maybe some hard decisions with regards to players at the latter end of their career. And, where do they transition to? Maybe they transitioned into a coaching role for these new players that are coming in, or you go radical and, like you said, it's suffering. Brunel, as an example, just on the discussion we were putting earlier, Jacques Brunel, look at the team that he capped for France, and he got utterly berated by the media, Dupont, and like genuinely just have a look. And that's it. It's either being brave and making the hard decisions now, or it's finding a way of slowly sort of improving as they've gone along, more sort of like what England did than anyone else, if that makes sense.
That's it. Yeah, this has been my thing. I think in order to achieve what you're saying, I think we need to invest in the coaches because this is something. No, while we're going through these tough times, I always remember odd things that Warren Gatland used to say. And Warren Gatland, especially in his second tenure, got a lot of things wrong and said a lot of things that he shouldn't have said. But one thing that he always said was, in Wales, you talk way too much about player salaries and not enough about who's coaching the players. And I think that he was absolutely spot on with that particular point. Anyway, we'll use that as kind of a jumping off point to go into the predictions for next week. I'll start with the Calcutta Cup, even though it's not the first game. So, Ethan, we just talked about England there.
Yep.
Definitely the team with momentum, but this is rarely a game that follows the form book.
Yeah, because I think for England's streak, as impressive as it is, I'm still a bit because I'm trying to think who have they played. Well, granted, we arguably should have won, not wanting to dig up any old dirt from last year in terms of the whole kicking controversy. But, that was basically England scraping a win. Then I'm trying to think. They beat a New Zealand team that, granted, they've just sacked their coach and had who knows how many injuries there after pulling a miracle beating again beating us. And it's not like they've had a big challenge. It's not like they've gone against South Africa, that they've gone against. Sure, Argentina. Well, they did play Argentina, yeah.
They did. They
I feel
very
like they
nearly
played
lost.
Netherlands.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like they played everyone bar South Africa, so it's still. I mean, granted, the Prem teams, like for example, Bath's doing absolutely fantastically. It's just I feel at the moment it's quite hard to because as you said earlier, them playing against Wales, it's really hard to actually read from that game to see like where England actually are. So I
Mm.
feel I'm not expecting us to beat England, but as you say, both teams will be up for it. Townsend struggling to justify his salary, his part-time salary. Um, and all the Scotland players, again, they're still frustrated from the autumn. So I think I'm not expecting us to win, but I think it'll be much closer
Mm.
than you
Interesting.
might expect.
Anybody else? Adam, your thoughts on Scotland versus England?
I think like sort of adding on to Ethan's point of we're not quite sure where England could be. This could be the game where England could narrowly win against Scotland and we think, oh, there's
Mm.
gaps there, or they could actually blow them out of the park, and then we're like, oh right, okay, they actually need to be like taken seriously. I've always sort of put the England-France game at the end as a Grand Slam potential. Like it's definitely a Six Nations potential decider, but
Mm.
I'd say England winning it by 10 points, and then that will be their caveat then for the rest of the Six Nations. I think with Scotland getting caught out by Italy, I'd say it's how they can develop that and how Townsend can use that as a caveat to be like, listen, we always beat England. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the Murrayfield crowd also reacts to that as well. Because if they lose that, and then Townsend eventually he has to, face the crowd essentially. Yeah, I just find that really interesting to see how the scope going forward for Scottish rugby. And of course, as we said about the Newcastle rumors as well, there's a lot of stories in this, but I do think an England win.
I think you guys are being really kind to Scotland. For me, I think I give a 50% chance to England thrashing them, to be honest. I don't know, Mike, what your thoughts are.
Yeah. I literally was going to say I feel like it's going to be, uh, unfortunately, Ethan. I think they're going to win by sort of at least two or three tries, and partly because you guys don't have your traditional two tries coming from Van der Merwe on the wing just out of
Yeah.
nothing, right? But partly because I think England are, unfortunately, like I said at the start, unfortunately, them and France are just, I think they're just a little bit further out of the reach of um, the rest of us four, if I'm being candid.
I think so. I mean, it will go to sticking with you, Mike. We'll talk about Ireland versus Italy next. I mean, after the France game, a lot of the Irish pundits were saying, at least it's Italy next. Do you think they'll still be thinking that?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I think the players hope so too. I saw a few pundits were saying, "Oh, it's a really good opportunity to blood some players." Cool, do it. This is what we want. Um, But I think from my side, listen, the boys are going to have some confidence. Quesada's being very modest in his interviews, where he's saying, "Listen, we don't want to talk about wins. We want to talk about performance, and let you guys discuss about the other stuff in the background." But the boys, it's it. There's a different feel around camp, and I'm speaking from speaking to the players and how they're talking about this Six Nations and the fact that I think they're all genuinely aligned in one vision. So yeah, if we're gonna do it, like this is the year to try and really target that game. That said, it's going to be a different Ireland, and we can see what Ireland do when they recoup. The second half they went back to sort of that aerial game, which traditionally we don't do too well on. And that's a real sort of forte for the Irish team. So it could be Ireland. To be honest with you, it is probably going to be Ireland by maybe like two tries if they get it right. But if we manage to impose some of the physicality that we imposed against Scotland, I think it could be a long day because both of our teams rely on quick ball, like I said. So if we're able to slow the Irish ball more than they're able to slow ours, then we have a good chance.
Yeah. Pray for the rain. Do a rain dance. Adam, I think Mike's alluded to it there. What it if Ireland put out their strongest team and beat Italy, it's one of those it's one of those no-win situations. Because if they do that, people, rightly or wrongly, people will say, "Oh, it's Italy." Whereas if they either scrape a win or anything other than a comfortable win, it will be like, "Oh, it shows the problems are not there." So, is this the time to just throw caution to the wind with the selection?
Yeah, I'd say this is the time to give Craig Casey the nine shirt. This is the time to give, like, when we say like rotation, these are like URC/European proven players. Like, this isn't like I mentioned, I think it was last year, I mentioned like Craig Casey hasn't like really made the shirt himself. Like he's had the 21 shirt more than he has had the nine shirt. Give him the nine shirt. Give I would say give Prendergast the 10 shirt as well. We just need him to get more confidence in there as well. The likes of the changes that I want to see like the likes of a Dogbo play. When we bleed, there was new players in. These guys are good young players. They're going to be hungry for it. Postleweight, put him either in the 23 jersey or start him. That there is players there that we can use that are very good. I'd even argue like put Robert Balakin at 14. Like I know that these are Ulster players, but these are Ulster players that are playing very, very well at the minute. So put them in and let them see how the Ireland setup works for them. You need these players to sort of discover the setup and actually see it how it is in a game for it to be work for it to work or not. And I do think it's Ireland in Dublin, down in the Aviva against Italy. Italy are playing very well, as you do say, Mike. I feel like this is probably the best chance in years that you might be looking at us limping, essentially limping along, and this is a chance that you can take. But it's how we react to that France result. Andy Farrell looked a bit deer in headlights in the interview. I don't know if he's got the answers, but it's whether or not the players, because I firmly believe that when Timothy came onto the pitch, it was almost sort of like a players going like, right, okay, we'll do this now. And then Timothy scoring that try, which to be fair was a really good pass from Prendergast to McCluskey onto Timothy. Like I just feel like the players really need to take it now and they need to see how much they can do on the pitch together. I'd keep a back row of Kieran Prendergast, Conan, and Timony, and just it's things like that, different formations. If we do win by a score, that would be good. If we try it. However, if we play, as you said, Hugh, play the full strength team, get 50 points. What does that in theory matter? Italy could score 30 points against that team the way the defense went, and that would be more beneficial for Italy than it would be for us.
Mm.
Like there is no way of putting it. Like a 50 points, a 30-point win would almost feel like a loss for us. No offense, Mike, but in the grand scheme of things, if we want to be top four in the world, it doesn't really work out that way.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think as well, what I would really like for the first time in God knows how many years is to finish with 15 on the pitch against you guys. Because last year, last year with before Vincent came off, before Lamaro got yellow carded, can't remember who else got yellow carded. We got two yellows and a red. I genuinely thought we were the better team for that 50
Yeah.
minute period. So again, for us, it's always down to consistency. And if they want to make the next step, then it has to be more than words. So that's sort of what I'm holding it to. And as I know Hugh is probably feeling right now, like you have to hold your hope to the words that are spoken because that's all you have, right? So for us, I'm hoping to see. Listen, I want us to play against Ireland's best team or perceived best team, whether that's with players rotated in who are on form or not.
Mm.
Great. For me, it's I want to play against the best and see where we are in terms of against those best teams because we're not going to get we're not going to get too many more opportunities. Although obviously we've got this new championship coming up, where we're going to have that opportunity ahead of the World Cup because the next few games we're going to be playing against people who potentially we're going to see in quarterfinals or so on and so forth. So for me, I'd love to see us really try and sort of batten down and try and squeeze something out of this game. Even listen, for me, if we get a losing bonus point or a losing bonus point and a try bonus point, I'd love that. I'd love, as long as we go in with the intent of trying winning the game. That's the only thing that I care about.
I think, based on what we said before about how when Italy are winning, they tend to be low scoring games. If you do get a try bonus point out in Dublin, I think that would be
Mhm.
even a kind of a bit like Adam said, even kind of regardless of how many you end up conceding, that would be a confidence booster
Yeah.
because it's like, hey, we can score tries. This is good. Ethan, how do you see this one going?
I'm I don't know if I'm just full of hope, but I genuinely think Italy can pull it off. Because you saw how strong their scrum was. This is an Ireland that's on its legs with injuries and has suffered a fairly humiliating loss. Again, and Italy is what's it? They're jumping up and down after beating Scotland in a fairly convincing manner. Because I don't think Italy's got many injuries, do they? I think they've got a few, but it's not crippling,
To
is
be
it,
honest
Mike?
with you, we're ravaged by injuries at the moment.
Capo
Oh,
We've
okay.
got
Capozzo is the kind of
Capozzo,
bad one.
Yeah,
Riccioni,
yeah.
Lucchesi. Like we've got probably about half of our team got missing as well.
Mm. So I think Italy's also been a team that's been quite unlucky to lose against England. That I think they pretty much whenever I watched them over the last few years, there have been games where they've, whether it's by a penalty, that it's been a very close margin that they've lost by, and they've also beaten Australia for the second time.
Hmm.
So I think Italy does. I think they can do it.
I'm going to burst all your bubbles. I think it's going to be an
Yeah,
incredibly drab game, and I think
yeah.
Ireland are going to win it by 15. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Now, for Wales versus France, I think rather than predict the result, I think that probably a more interesting question for me, this is a bit of a conspiracy theory, kind of. My question is, why would France send their first choice team for this game? Because if they want to build depth, and when you consider that the Six Nations has gone down to 6 weeks, so they've lost a rest week, why would France not send a B team for this game? Because if they send their strongest team to play Wales, it could easily be 70. So why which is the smarter thing for France not to play the B team and keep Dupont, Jalibert, LBB at home and just kind of get the 4 try bonus point? Because even France's B team is probably good enough to get a 4 try bonus point by halftime against Wales. Would that be smarter for them? Is there any credit to that way of thinking?
Um, In a way, yes, but in a way as well, they'll probably be looking at that points difference. Like if it comes down to England v France and there's no Grand Slam, they're going to be looking at the points difference. This is like when the points difference in like especially in the Six Nations gone by where there hasn't been a Grand Slam, it's became so important. So why wouldn't you send? Like I know that you said that the second team of France, they are very, very good and they probably on their day could beat I would say a handful of the top tier one teams in general with their first team. But why wouldn't they not want to have an LBB going for the try record again? Do you know, like the try record again, or why would you want like 80 points in the points difference and especially with that 1 week they could probably do it against I don't know maybe like an Italy or a Scotland potentially it just depends on where they stand but this game here is that I think week two now because they don't have that week one like they don't have the 2 week break this is a real pinch point this is when we see how they're actually going to take the tournament. I think France, with intent, should send a first team to Wales. No,
Hmm.
no offense, Hugh, but it's not any harm for the WRU. But I feel like for their point, in my opinion, points difference matters a lot in that sense.
Yeah. You got a theory on that one, Mike?
I think I 100% agree with what Adam said. I think optics matter massively to the French and the French public, and those accolades, top try scorer and stuff. That stuff that they'll hold on to coming up to the World Cup, and they'll utilize that as a bit of a narrative to try and sort of create this rhetoric of where they're going as a team, and building into this 2027 World Cup next year as well. So that I can imagine them going quite hard, but also I think you've made a really valid point. It also is going to say, okay, well, how much do they value the next game? And that's a consideration to have as well, even if you're taking sort of the question of depth out of it, because we know they're fantastic. So what I reckon we will see is probably a sort of that's still sort of that spine of first team players, and then rotated, certain questions, like you said. But I don't think they're just gonna sort of make wholesale changes. That said, I've been wrong before, so we'll find out.
Ethan, what's your expectations for this one?
It's a hard one because, again, it's kind of
Is
like,
it? I'm pretty sure that France are going to win.
oh, it's more afterwards because the games get progressively harder for France after Wales, in that they've got Italy, who was it last year? Italy arguably should have won with that controversial penalty. Was
Yeah,
that 2 years ago?
2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago.
That's 2 years ago. So Italy have come close to beating France. So they're always potential banana skin, as we found out earlier. Then they come to Scotland, and then after that, it's probably the Grand Slam decider against England. So it's really when can they afford to kind of let their guard down a bit? And then is Gatier's. I always. I never know if his job's in peril or not, because I always often see things periodically being like, oh, all the pressure's on him. But is he sitting comfortably that he could afford to gamble a bit?
Galtier, I think he's always going to be under pressure because I don't think he's. I saw someone on another comment on this channel, another video on this channel said, "Oh, why are you saying Galtier is under pressure and things, current reigning champions and stuff?" I think he's always under pressure because I don't think that he's a very personable guy. I don't think he's a very charismatic guy, and I think that when things have gone wrong, he kind of hasn't satisfied. He hasn't given answers that kind of satisfied the public, and I also think that a lot of people in France are of the opinion that he is just delivering on the talent that he has.
Mm.
So whether that's right or wrong, I think that's a perception that exists. So look, as Mike said, the optics would be, even if France do send a B team and they do put 50 on Wales, then it would still look bad for everybody. So I can imagine that certainly the organizers of the tournament would take a dim view on it. So maybe, but I think everyone is predicting a fairly comfortable France win either way. Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of this evening's show. I hope that everybody's enjoyed listening to our first episode of the Six Nations podcast, which doesn't have a name. Six Nations Rewind. Okay, I've just called it Six Nations Rewind. That we're having this year. So that just leaves me to say thank you to Adam, Ethan, and Mike.
Cheers, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for everybody for listening. Enjoy your rugby and hope that everybody's team wins. Cheers.